Okay, this is an important episode. Do you know why?
Why? Because
Because it's
it's
episode 15.
okay.
Maybe. Actually, no, I don't think it is. It might be 14 now that I think about it. Oh well,
Nice.
who cares? I was gonna say it wasn't special anyway because we suck. We
Aw.
don't do anything special.
Aw.
First question!
Uh-oh. Alright, what you got?
Okay, so again, because we're basically the Persona and Trails podcast, this time I thought I'd focus, but we tried to be slightly objective here,
We
I
try.
guess.
We try.
So I thought this time I would focus on something that I actually believe both games do badly,
Okay.
and that is side quests. So my question is, what to you makes a good side quest?
Okay. To me, a side quest is, or a good side quest, somehow either progresses some kind of world building or character building. Like it's not just a chore like it is in those two games, especially the Cold Steel games, but it still serves as development of some kind.
Well, the Cold Steel games, it's a little more.
It says that's what it's for, and I mean some of them maybe do a little bit, but there are also a lot of just go kill the monsters because I asked you two quests.
Well, I don't know if I want to get into specific examples yet, or give my, let you finish up your answer, and then I'll give my answer, and then get into specific examples. Because I do actually want to make specific mention of Cold Steel and tie
Okay.
it into the earlier games, but I don't know if that's going to send us off down a trail where I
Yeah,
should just finish, answer my question first.
that's fair. I mean, yeah,
But
to me
okay,
it just has some sort of progression or development or something along those lines that makes it still feel like it's part of the game and not just a chore. Know what I mean? It
yeah,
doesn't have to, I think that at least in a JRPG concept, that's more what I'm looking for. Some kind of, I don't want to say depth to it, but more depth to it than just go kill the monster, please.
yeah.
You know, that's, you know, that's what I like to look for.
To me, I think the best side quests, and this doesn't happen very often, but it does happen,
Hmm.
are indistinguishable from main game content in terms of quality and what you're doing.
Okay.
So to me, and that doesn't just come from having a storyline that actually has character development in it,
Okay.
but it's also about the gameplay being something other than either an offshoot mini game or go kill a bunch of monsters.
Okay.
And a good example of this to me, I think Chrono Trigger has some of the best side quests in
It does.
JRPGs.
It does.
There aren't very many, and they all come at pretty much the tail end of the game, but
Yeah,
they're
there's like five.
all excellent.
They are.
And in terms of the quality of the content, they could just as easily have been required, and you would never question it.
No, no, you
There's
wouldn't.
there's unique dungeons, there's unique enemies, there's plot lines, there's character growth for all the characters.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, they're excellent. When I think back on some of the key defining moments in that game, some of them come from the side quests.
Yeah.
Robo
I mean,
growing the forest,
yeah.
Luca getting a chance to save her mother.
Hmm.
It's they're
They're
really
big. Yeah, they're big moments that are, you know, so big and so meaningful that they could be main game stuff and not just side quests.
and that's where if you want to say, and we've kind of touched on this in the past, but with Persona, whether or not the social links count as
Hmm.
main game or side content, ultimately, and this is why I broke it down specifically into two things because they fulfill the story part of actually being really interesting.
Yeah.
But the problem is on the gameplay side of things, all it is going to a certain place in Mementos and fighting a boss.
Yeah.
And that to me is where it's not as interesting as, say, every person having their own mini palace.
Yeah.
Like, it's nowhere near as big as a regular palace, but everybody has their own unique one.
Okay.
Or if, uh, like when you have to like find out information about them or whatever, the ones you
Hmm.
get on the phone,
Okay.
like I'm okay with some of the ones that Mishima gives you, but the fact that so many of them are just go find this person, just go listen to a bunch of people, find the person in Mementos and whatever.
Yeah. That's
If
boring.
yeah, if there was more involvement on that end of actually finding the characters and having scenes involved with them,
Okay.
both before and after, like
Yeah.
I like one of the characters, uh, like I think this might have been in Royal specifically,
Oh, okay.
but one of the ones that really stuck out to me was it was a brother whose parents died
Okay.
who really hates his sister, like to the point where he pushed her down some stairs
Okay.
because he's basically having to sacrifice everything in his life for
To
her.
take care of her.
Yeah,
Okay.
but he also really loves her. It's a really, I mean,
Huh.
you kind of get the dynamic. It's like I really love you, but I have to give up everything because of you.
Yeah. I go.
But all this is just like sent to you in text. And I think if you had a chance to see these characters and see this dynamic, it would really lend it a whole lot of power.
Okay.
And it would also help contextualize, I think, the actions of the Phantom Thieves' characters.
Instead
And,
of just okay.
like how much they're willing to go out of their way to help people so that when you do go back to the ethos of whether or not you can, it's ethical to change hearts.
You can look back at all these ones that you've done and
And I think it lends to that overall, the narrative world building and themes of the game. If
okay.
you had more to it in the gameplay. And that's why it really does have to be both in order to
Yeah.
be like a really solid experience. Because Tales has a lot of side quests that really build on the characters,
Okay.
but either the gameplay is so disconnected from anything else that happens in the game.
Hmm.
Like, let's take Berseria for example, because that's one where there's not a lot of side quests, but each one is fairly substantial.
Okay.
Like Eisen's is just roaming around, and then you happen to find a doll for his sister,
Okay.
and it's like big deal. You just kind of find a doll somewhere, and then there's a scene, and then you find a doll somewhere, and then there's a scene.
Okay.
It's not engaging gameplay wise.
Makes sense.
Okay, yes, it does do some of the things we're talking about, where it gives you background onto him and his relationship with his sister,
Hmm.
but the gameplay, sorry, the
But the
gameplay side of
gameplay
things,
is
it
lacking.
yeah, I mean, you don't even have to go into like unique dungeons for some of this stuff, for any of this stuff.
Yeah.
They're just like literally lying around town.
Okay.
And then your reward for doing it all is a boss again in an area, a location you've already been to.
Yeah.
So, eh,
It's like I get what you're saying, but I feel like that is a lot when you're asking for just a side quest. I mean,
well,
if we're talking about a game that only has, you know, 4 or 5 side quests total, then fine. Then make each one that big.
Which Berseria
But
does. It only has like 8 side quests.
all right, but
That's why I
Berseria,
use that example specifically.
but Berseria also wasn't great.
Yeah, it was middling. But my point is, I and I will say this: I would rather because I would rather have fewer side quests, but more meaningful side quests. I mean, I agree. If you want to have a game with 50 side quests, then making 50 optional dungeons is a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, but you can still put a little bit of narrative meaning in 50 side quests, but
But
you can't make 50.
I would personally rather you just focus on making 10 really solid side quests that are super memorable, a la
Hmm.
Chrono Trigger,
Yeah,
rather than, quality over quantity. And that kind of brings us to Cold Steel. Only it's
yeah,
not just Cold Steel because I haven't played the Crossbell games. I'm really
okay.
curious about how they handle side quests because it kind of makes sense in Sky why they are structured the way they are
Good. Yeah, with
because that's the
it's your
Bracer
job.
Guild. That's
Yeah,
what the Bracer Guild does.
it's your just job basically to do side quests. So meaningless side quests are your literal job. So I get why they have very sidey feeling side quests.
And they're not the most fun in the world. They definitely could have been spiced up. I mean, to use Western RPGs, I think Oblivion has a lot of excellent fun side quests that have nothing to do with going in a dungeon and killing someone.
Yeah.
The Dark Brotherhood House Party
Oh, it was fucking
is,
great.
yeah, is one of the best side quests ever conceived in a game, I think.
Hmm.
So my point is, there's stuff you can do there,
Yeah.
but at least it was contextualized within the narrative of the game.
Yeah.
Cold Steel, and this is only minor spoilers because it's revealed in like the second, like halfway through the first game. The
Okay.
whole point of Class 7 is to recreate the Bracer Guild,
Yeah.
but the problem I have with it is that it doesn't necessarily seem to fit within the structure of either a classroom setting or a the Erbonian Empire and how they're supposed to act because they're supposed to be a lot more militaristic,
Yeah.
which is why I think if they could have found a way to reflect that more in the tasks rather than having literally some of the exact same fucking jobs. I mean, in both games, in Cold Steel 1 and Trails in the Sky, one of your first jobs is changing lamp bulbs.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, it made sense for the bracers.
Hmm.
It's a little bit weird for military academy students.
Yeah.
Surely you could have come up with something more fitting but still accomplishes the same goal of having them go out and really interact with the people of the city.
No, I'm sure they could have found some ways to make it more fitting with the, but I don't know. I don't know why I'm trying to defend it. I kind of really don't like their side quests either.
So, and that's what I'm not. It doesn't like take down the whole game or anything, but and nor does it with Persona 5. But
Mhm.
if you can't be critical about the things you like, do you really like them or are you just delusional?
Yeah.
These are just things that I think they could do better because good side quests. I don't buy into the idea that the side content should be better than the main content,
No.
which is something that I have seen floated by people before.
Okay.
Um, but I do think that the side content
Should be
should
good.
as
Shouldn't.
good or
Yeah.
almost as good.
Shouldn't be like notably worse.
Yeah, it definitely shouldn't be tedious. I think it's when you get tedious that it really starts like you have done a bad job.
When you're doing it because it's there and just because you have to, not because it's.
Yeah, not because you want to. And I'm not gonna lie, there are moments in both Persona 5 and the Trails games where it's like I don't want to do this. I'm just doing this
I,
to
I want the It's like I want the points, not because the quest is interesting.
Yeah, I'm just checking a checkbox.
Yeah, I've done that with Cold Steel a lot, and it kind of sucks.
So, and that's what I mean. We've described some of the ones we've ripped on those games. I've said Chrono Trigger is one that I like. Let's like spend a few minutes here making it positive and just talk about some side quests we like. I mean, if you have any that you can think of.
Trying to think of some that just stand out.
Well, I there's some in Tales of the Abyss that I think are really good. I can't recall the specifics off the top of my head, but I know there are a few with Jade where you start to really get into his backstory.
Okay.
That if you don't witness them, it's fine, but actually going through those side quests contextualizes a lot of his actions as a character and who he became.
Okay.
And you understand his relationship with other characters better. And to me, okay, the gameplay aspect of the side quests in Tales of the Abyss aren't great because usually they're very specifically timed things where you have to go to a place and watch a scene.
Okay.
But in terms of filling in the background of the character, they were good. That was one that stands out to me that I think back on that I honestly forget sometimes wasn't part of the main game because
Okay.
it is so integral to understanding Jade's character.
Who he is.
Hmm.
All right. I don't know. I know we've debated before whether or not it counts as a JRPG, but a lot of the side quests in Fire Emblem, like the three houses, I really like because the gameplay is pretty much the exact same, but they're all character based. They're all individual character stories where there's, reasoning behind what you're doing, then the regular battle, then you have these moments between these two characters to kind of build who they are and their place in the world. And I think those are well done because that game has really grindy side quests sometimes, but those particular character ones stand out as really interesting because they build on the characters.
Yeah, I mean it's like whether or not you want to call the fucking character quests in Exilia 2 side content, but
Mm.
I eh,
But
eh.
I
Exilia
mean
2
that,
has its own problems.
but yeah, I mean that's all I look for is just building what's there or a reason to do it.
Well, it's surprising that how challenging it is to come up with some really good ones off the top of your head.
Hmm.
Because the ones that are good you remember, but for the most part, side quests are one of those things that a lot of times just feel like padding,
They do,
and it sucks because when done well, they can be super powerful and super memorable. Again,
but
like
they're
it's not a JRPG, but I come back to I think I prefer Oblivion over Skyrim because Oblivion in my mind just has better quests,
it does.
and that makes the difference to me. And again, I come back to Chrono Trigger where those side quests are so good.
Those like four side quests that it had, but they're all major things.
Yeah, so it's just underutilized, I guess. The potential and power of the side quest.
Yeah, a lot of them fall into that MMO side quest problems of do X this or, you know,
Yeah, and even when they're not, it also in JRPGs especially it becomes just go talk to person.
so I hate those ones. Go talk to so and so, go talk to so and so. Congratulations, you did it.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of the Cold Steel ones. It's like go into town and buy me this. Okay, I did it. Okay, bye.
Yeah, go get me this, go kill the boss, or we're done.
Yeah, not
So,
exactly the most exciting of
no,
tasks. I mean they're chores. They're literally chores.
which, yeah. And some games have gotten to the point of even differentiating between notable side quests and chores. I've been playing Horizon Zero Dawn lately, and it does that. It has side quests which have some kind of narrative arc, have some kind of character development, and are generally decent. And they have errands, which are just straight up errands. Go kill 4 enemies, or go find this thing and bring it back to me. And somehow I'm okay with that because it differentiates between what's good and what's not because it knows what they bothered to put the effort into.
Yeah, I mean, Skyrim kind of did that. It touted as having infinite quests, but literally the infinite quests are just talk to an innkeeper, ask for a job, and they'll tell you to go kill something.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I know it's not your question you're asked, but maybe the way that maybe if they could differentiate between those two a little more often, that'd be nice. So I'm not doing side quest thinking it's going to be a side quest and it's really just an errand,
Like
or
I
I'm
said,
not avoiding something because I think it's an errand, but there's really something really cool behind it.
my personal preference is just fewer side quests, but more substantial ones. That's what I
It,
really prefer.
generally, I think I'd agree with you. It depends on the game, I think, a little bit. But in JRPGs especially, I would agree with you.
Well, that's what we're talking about.
I know.
It's because the narrative drive. The other thing that's difficult with side quests is pacing
Is
because
how do you detract away or stop the main story to go do this side quest without feeling like you're just stopping this big thing going on?
yeah, how do you integrate them into the story without it interrupting the pacing that the plot is trying to establish?
Hmm.
And there's no great answer to that.
Which honestly, I feel more than some, at least, the Trails games did that decently. They established that we're doing side quests now because that's what, like, because it's side quest time, and they gave you at least some kind of narrative reason why it's side quest time. Whether it's your job or whether it's just dick around day or whatever, they were able to give you a reason why you're taking a break from
It
the main.
depends though, because like
I mean,
sometimes
sometimes.
sometimes they feel so shoehorned in, especially in the second game. In the second game, they're handled so badly.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, I'm gonna go meet up with my friends. I want to meet up with my friends. Okay, I met up with one friend.
Now
Who
we're gonna
wants
take.
to fuck around town for a bit?
And
Collect
again,
herbs.
they try to justify that.
But it
It's-
botches the pacing
It does.
horrendously.
It does. But they at least try to justify it in a way that's not just "fuck you, we're taking a break now." They at least give you a reason, even if it's
Well, but the problem is that it's
text based.
mandatory side questing.
Yeah. Well,
You can't not do them. You
you
have to
can't.
do at
Well,
least one.
only sometimes. Sometimes they are all optional.
It's incredibly rare that that happens.
It is. It is.
And I mean incredibly, like once or twice per game.
But
Anyway, I think that's enough about this topic.
all right.
I feel like we have nothing more to add at this point. We'll end up talking in circles.
Yeah, we're getting there already. So move on to the next question, I guess.
Yep. Did you
Which
ever come up with another
I
one?
rem I remembered it.
All right, great. Go.
It was about enemy permanence
Mm.
in relation to two very particular games that kind of handle it differently. So the first one is Cthulhu Saves the World, which did you ever play that?
Yeah, it was Breath
It
of
was a
Death did the same thing, which was their first game,
yeah, where
and then
there's
I
a
never played any of their other games.
yeah, there's like a set number of enemies in a dungeon, and then once you reach that number of no of random encounters, then there won't be any more. So, what's your opinion on that? Good, bad?
Well, I think the way Bravely Default also had a way of doing this,
Okay,
which was you could just control the encounter rate.
really?
Yeah, you could turn encounters off, or you could set it to really high. Like it was like a variable, like
Like
off, low, normal,
just like in
above
the options? Or?
average. Yeah, and you could adjust it at any time.
Okay.
But my thing is, I think
Hmm.
all of that is useless
Yeah.
because you can solve the problem by just having enemies appear on the map and
Yeah.
then a way to get around enemies that you don't want to fight.
Yeah.
It's just like problem solved.
But I wonder if part of that is to help you maintain your level, knowing that you won't be under leveled, but you won't need to grind anymore.
Well, that's why you should have as many enemy encounters as it takes for you to be the level you should be at in order to challenge the boss.
Yeah, but sometimes people will skip an enemy or they'll hit every single enemy and their level gets skewed a little bit.
I think it's within range. It should be within range. I mean, if
I mean,
this is
ideally.
again to go back and shit on Berseria some more. That game is horrible about enemy placement because it's just you
Well,
walk into a room and then blah, there's 7 enemies fucking everywhere.
hmm.
Because usually when I say I don't grind in games, I don't go out of my way to engage in more encounters beyond fighting everything as I see it.
Okay.
So I will fight every encounter in the dungeon on the way to the boss. And I have
Okay.
never once found that that has left me in a disadvantageous position.
No, if you fight every single one, I wouldn't think you would.
The
But
only the only time it's bad is when you do it like the Berseria way and there's just more enemies because nobody thought about it and you end up either bored or over leveled
hmm,
because you don't know as a player.
yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, should I fight every enemy? Can I skip some? How many can I skip? But I think by ultimately having it just enemies appear on the map, you give the player enough control over the encounter rate that they can just fix it themselves. But
Okay.
that's I think I'm answering something that's not your question because your question was more about enemy permanence, right? Like
Hmm.
non-responding enemies.
Exactly. Once you reach that number of random encounters, there are no more.
Yeah.
So does that detract from the fun in some way of now I've killed them all, so now I'm just gonna wander around in an empty room?
I mean, I definitely when I played it, I would get to the start of a dungeon, fight all the fights, and then go through the dungeon because it was less of a pain in the ass. But
See,
the
and that's an option, but that sounds awful, kinda, of doing all 50 fights all in the first room and then the entire dungeon is empty.
but I think the larger problem I have with it
Okay.
is I think one of the things that's good about RPGs broad spectrum is
Yeah.
the amount of control you have over the difficulty.
Okay.
It's one of those it's one of like people like to shit on them for being especially JRPGs for being grind heavy, but the fact of the matter is you don't very rarely unless it's an older game do you need to grind.
You can just use more skill instead of grinding.
Yeah,
But
you can just reevaluate your strategy, change your equipment. Like there's alternate methods. But
so it's not. Yeah.
unlike a game like Devil May Cry, like an action game, you can't grind if you're having trouble with a boss in Devil May Cry.
No.
You have no choice but to just figure it out.
Okay.
Whereas in an RPG, if you're having trouble with the fight, you can either try it again with a different strategy, which
Or
is
you
what
can
I would
just.
prefer to do, or if
Yeah.
you want to just go back and grind battles,
You can do that just to make it objectively easier by being a higher level.
yeah, that is your call.
Okay.
And I that's one of the things that I actually like about RPGs is just that option. And
Okay.
while I understand how having a set number can help with the balancing, especially as somebody who complains about late game balancing usually being so easy, I think it's more important to have that player freedom because there are a lot of different people who play RPGs. Some people play them mostly for the story and don't really care about the gameplay.
Yeah.
Some people play games like Etrian Odyssey where there's barely any story at all and it's all gameplay.
Yeah.
So I think the fact that the level creates a kind of built-in difficulty option means that giving the player the freedom to play with that how they will, I prefer that. I think that's pretty integral to the accessibility of the genre.
Okay. All right. Well, what if I mean, because what if they add just a way to do another fight even if you've reached that number? Like if
Then
you wanted to still grind, then you just hit the whistle skill and another enemy pops up. Then you still have that ability to grind.
then I just come back to either make it a variable random encounter thing like they did in Bravely Default,
Okay.
or again, my preferred method, just don't have fucking random encounters.
True. Yeah, I mean that's my preferred method too, but this is a an RPG Maker game that's like super fucking basic, and random encounters are just how that engine is built, at least as far as I know.
Sure, well, I mean, random encounters are always one of those things where it's not like you could go back to an old game. Like you
Hmm.
complain about random encounters, but you get it.
Yeah.
It's when there's a game past the Super Nintendo era that has random encounters that you're like, fucking why? Who thought this was a good idea?
Yeah. All right.
So like in that context, okay. I still think a sliding like the chance to choose your set your own encounter rate is preferable,
Okay.
but there's not one way to do things.
All right. Fair enough.
I don't know.
So,
Do you have your own answer to that question?
eh,
Because
I
you just
I I
like
don't
threw the question out there and then didn't even answer it yourself.
I don't really have a problem with it. I like the idea that they have somewhat of a recommended number of fights that sets a recommended, just ideal difficulty in what is their opinion. I like the option of doing less or doing more so you still have that little bit of freedom, but the fact that they give you this is what the game was designed for and built around, and here's just some options to make this a little more relaxing if you want it to be after you do all that fights. I like what they were trying to do, maybe just not the way that they actually did it.
I
Make
guess
sense?
my only counter to that would be that again it comes back to at that point I feel less like I'm playing a game and figuring things out for myself and more just going through a checklist. Again, it comes back to I'll just stand in the opening of the dungeon and fight all the fights and then go through the dungeon,
Which,
just checking things off the checklist.
yeah, some people would do, undoubtedly, and that would be shitty. But all right,
Because I mean, part of the
it's like
fun of the gameplay is discovering things. So when everything is just handed to you like that, like fight 50 fights and you should be ready for the boss, it's like, okay, well, where's the discovery? Where's the feeling of adventure where I feel like I'm actually going out and doing things on my own? I'm just like
okay,
checking a checkbox.
it feels too rigid, like there's a recommended level written next to the boss fight or something.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So I guess I'll move on to my second example then. Is how enemies worked in Final Fantasy 13 3,
I've never
which
played it, so
the way it worked in that one is there was a set number of every particular enemy. Like throughout the whole world, there was say 100 skeletons, and you'd fight skeletons in 3 different dungeons. And once you hit 100 skeletons, you would fight a super skeleton, and then after that, there were no more. You wouldn't fight another single skeleton in any dungeon ever in the entire rest of the game. But there were so many that you wouldn't ever hit that number unless you were like going out of your way to hit that number. But you could. And there was, in fact, a side quest designed around multiple playthroughs of that game to kill all of the enemies and just extinct all monsters. Do you like that idea of there being a set number of every kind of enemy? Or do you think enemies should just respawn forever?
It it ultimately just comes back to why, because again, debatability of whether or not this is a JRPG, whatever.
Hmm.
It's more of an action RPG.
Okay.
But Dark Souls 2,
Okay.
if you kill an enemy 15 times, like
Yeah.
that location's enemy,
Okay.
it ceases to respawn.
Really?
Yeah, and the idea behind it originally
Hmm.
was supposed to be if you're like having a trouble on a boss, you always have to run back to the boss.
So this stops you from having to fight all those enemies if you keep dying and having to run back over and over and over again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Problem is, again, you come back to if you're dying to the boss over and over and over, because once your souls are in the boss room,
You can't, it's really hard to get them back. Or you basically can't.
yeah, get them out to go back to the bonfire to level up some more. So
Okay.
it comes back to that thing where, okay, but now you can't grind additional levels if you need that support just to complete the fight.
Okay.
It sounds like in 13.3 there's no reason to be that underleveled anyway,
Hmm.
which I just come back to at which point why does it even matter that there's a limit other
In
than to grind it out for a bunch of quests.
in 13, I think they were trying to go for some sort of narrative thing about it's the end of the world, everything's like resetting, no more anything is being born, so once something dies, it's just dead. That's part of the narrative. So the reason as to why in the way you're answering it is because that's how the world like mechanically works. You know, that's why from a in-game reasoning.
Like I
Now,
guess it just doesn't really sound like it adds anything to the experience.
I disagree. I felt like it helped build the world more because it helps confirm, or not, maybe not confirm, but it helps reinforce that idea that the world really is ending when you can make this particular monster legitimately extinct. It added something more than just there's an infinite number of enemies, because the game was trying to build a narrative of there's not an infinite number of anything anymore. And I thought it was just a cool mechanic because nothing else does that.
Aside from Dark Souls 2.
Aside from apparently Dark Souls 2. I didn't know that. That's kind of cool.
And again, to me, it doesn't add anything to the game. I, in fact, it's kind of annoying in some cases.
How so?
Like I said, it incentivizes you in some ways if you're having trouble with the boss to just go and kill all the enemies, come back, rest at the bonfire, go kill all the enemies, rest at the bonfire, go kill all the enemies, rest at the bonfire. Like just get it done and out of the way. again, it's like, oh, you need 50. There's 50 enemies in this dungeon. Well, I might as well just get them all done at the beginning, and then I can go through the dungeon without the hassle.
Okay. In both of the Dark Souls and the Cthulhu example, agree with you 100%. But the way 13.3 managed time and the fact that those enemies were not just in that one room in that one dungeon, I don't think it applies the same way.
And maybe it doesn't. I can't. This is a problem. I can't really comment on that game because I haven't played it.
Mm. But there's in 13 there's so many that you're not going to extinct all of them or really any of them unless you go out of your way to waste the time to try. And at that point you're detracting from the ability to actually get through the story.
Which is
That's
where I
why
come back to why I don't really see how it does anything in the first place. But
it's I mean honestly it's completionist side questy kind of stuff. That's why like I said that side quest to extinct everything is designed around multiple playthroughs and trying to be a completionist. But if you extinct one thing and you just see how it works, I felt like that helped build the world. And again, I thought it was cool because nothing else does that except apparently Dark Souls 2.
I guess I mean to each their own.
I don't know, it was unique. And we always complain that nothing is unique or tries something new. And when this was did something that was unique, I was excited by it.
Okay, I don't think that's the kind of unique thing that I was looking for, but
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Well, whatever.
In this game, if you kill all the enemies 100 times, they stay dead forever.
Yeah.
Okay, that doesn't magically make a good game though.
I'm not saying it does, but I'm saying it did something that isn't just copy and pasted from everywhere else. And it's worth noting that they at least tried something different instead of just making the same game a third time. You know, even if
Anyway,
it's yeah, whatever. Even if it's not good, it's unique, and I can appreciate that.
careful where you go with that. That is a dangerous road to go down.
Uh, that I can appreciate it, not necessarily that I can like it.
Dangerous road to go down.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, moving on. So my our next questions kind of tie together. So I'll go first, and then you can go next. They
Okay,
sort of tie together,
they do kind
and
of.
that's how do you feel about level scaling?
I hate it.
Same.
Cool, done. Next.
Well, yeah. It's not
Uh,
something you often see in JRPGs,
no, it's not.
but
But
basically everything I said earlier about having the ability to control the difficulty with grinding or not grinding,
yeah,
level scaling checks that out the fucking window.
it does.
And
And
yeah.
see, I was actually going to bring up a completely different reason why I don't like it. Is it gets rid of the sense of progression. If the enemies in the first area are just as hard as the enemies in the last area, then it doesn't really feel like you're getting better. If you can't go back to somewhere else and just kick something's ass that gave you trouble before, do you really feel any stronger than when you were just naturally there? You know,
Okay, okay. That's one way to approach it. Because
that's my.
the only JRPG that I know off the top of my head that did it
Hmm.
was the Lunar games,
Okay.
and it's just those games, for better or for worse, they're insanely linear.
Okay.
You only go through each dungeon once,
Okay.
So you never have that like going back to an older place problem.
Hmm.
But it does mean like as a kid, if I got stuck on a boss, I couldn't go back and grind because I was a dumb kid,
Yeah.
and get past the boss. I mean, I played it again as an adult a couple years ago, and it was a piss easy game anyway. But it made even just fighting fights and leveling up feel like a less
Insignificant.
exciting and interesting process.
Yeah, your levels don't mean anything anymore. Your whole sense of progression is gone when everything levels up with you. That
And
all leveling up in general feels basically meaningless.
and even if you do one of those things where it's staggered, so enemies
Mhm.
sort of scale, but A, they stop after a certain point, or B, they like you jump more increments than they do per level. Like
Yeah.
you jump two strength to every one for them, so you are getting stronger either way.
Hmm.
Why even bother then?
So I was gonna say that's the only way that it's even acceptable, but that's still
Just
it.
why?
I mean, I can understand if you go into, say, a dungeon and the enemies in that dungeon scale from 5 to 15 and you're recommended to beat it at, say, 12. So you go in there and they stay with you so you're not in the same dungeon for an hour and crazy stronger than you were just an hour ago. But they stop scaling at the level that you're supposed to be done with the dungeon so that if you do come back, they're still at their max level of 15 and you still feel stronger than you were when you were at that dungeon naturally 20 hours back. If they do it, if they scale in small areas just to keep consistent difficulty in a dungeon, I'm kind of okay with that ish.
I was gonna say even that I just personally am not a fan of because going back to old dungeons doesn't usually happen a lot in Jerpigas anyway.
No, no, it doesn't.
And to me, it's the bosses that are the most substantial thing.
Yeah.
Because random encounters should mostly just start and end. Like
Hmm.
random encounters are a separate issue. To me, it's when bosses scale that you really, because those are going to be your stopping points.
They are, and bosses should not scale.
Yeah, those points where you're going to get stuck, and that should be a thought out, crafted experience, not something you can just have scalable numbers to and have it still be the same fight.
Yeah, that I completely agree. Bosses should not scale for any reason. And like I said, in my dungeon that scales from 5 to 15 example, that boss is level 12, no matter what level you are, because it's recommended that you beat the dungeon at level 12. And that boss shouldn't scale either way, so that you can still do it at a lower level and have more challenge or grind up a little higher if you need those levels. And a boss scaling with you kills all of that. So, bosses definitely should not scale. And random encounters, yeah, but that's my thought. You agree?
I mean, like I said, I'm just not a fan of it in any context. I can't think of any context where I'm going to look at level scaling and go, mm-hmm. Because
Yeah.
even in something, to go outside of JRPGs again
Okay.
briefly,
Yeah.
it's weird to me in games like the Elder Scrolls where there's non-combat skills, but then leveling them up makes the combat more challenging.
Yeah, that.
What? What? That's
Yeah, that.
weird.
Yeah, it is weird.
And I mean, yeah, okay, at least in Jerpiga's levels are levels and it all just ties into the combat, but
But still,
yeah, why? Just don't do it. because an alternative approach for level scaling, and this also is an alternative approach for what you were saying about encounter rate earlier,
Yeah.
is your question. So I'll let
Yeah,
you
which
take
is
over.
experience scaling, where you get different amounts of experience depending on what level you are. So how do you feel more on scaling the character to more so fit the enemy level?
This I have no problem with
Again, me either.
because it still has that option
Of
of,
grind.
or rather, yeah, that freedom
Mhm.
to let the player, if they're having trouble, go back and
And grind.
also what it usually does if, in games like the Suikoden games or like an Enigma in this.
Okay.
Because you notice this more especially in games where your level up, the experience required to level up is always the same.
Yeah.
So like in Suikoden, you always need 1,000 experience to level up.
Okay.
But obviously, how much experience you get per fight is scaled. But
Yeah.
in a game like that, where it has like 108 characters and half of them are playable,
Mhm.
it lets lower level characters catch up very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Like you can take a character that is 30 levels lower and have them caught up in just a few solid fights.
Yeah. I mean, they won't still be the exact level, but they'll be within 5 and relevant now.
Yeah, and this is something that Cold Steel does.
Yeah. And
So, I,
and I'm okay with that because
yeah, I don't have a problem with it.
I feel like that if you're getting way more experience, then it kind of gives you this hint that you might be a little low leveled. If you're getting no experience, then yeah, you're probably over leveled. But you still have those options and those freedoms, and the enemies are still set and crafted and not just going with you.
It also means that you know that you don't have to fight any more fights, and you can just be fucking lazy and skip the fights if you want.
That is also an option.
And oh god, I was going somewhere with this.
Yeah, where were you going?
I Okay, even on hard in Cold
Yeah.
Steel,
Hmm.
I've never grinded in this playthrough at all.
Yeah, I
I,
haven't either.
I have no need for it, and I've never felt the game to be putting me in a situation where I have felt the need or an unfair difficulty. Because the only
Yeah.
way I can see this being bad
Hmm.
is if the point where you stop gaining experience is
Shuts off.
before
Oh, okay.
you're at a level where most people can deal with the boss. But
Yeah.
that's more a problem with the game's fundamental balance.
Then with the scaling itself.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. If they stop giving you experience at like 55, but the boss is scaled for you to be 60,
And I have played a few games that were like that.
I'm sure. And that sounds super shitty. And that's not a problem of the scaling itself. That's just a problem of the game almost underleveling you, like by design.
Yeah, it's weird. One thing I'd be curious about nowadays that I remember having issues with was
Hmm.
the first boss in Lost Odyssey.
First boss in Lost Odyssey is just hard.
The one where you recruit
Where it's the
Dickface.
griffin, the one that's like a griffin basically.
I don't remember.
That boss is just hard.
And
I mean, you can grind a little bit, but that boss is just hard.
I remember like, oh shit, I'm having trouble with this boss. And this was like over 10 years ago, so I'm not the same person now I was then. But I remember thinking, oh shit, I'm having trouble with this boss. Let me go grind, and
Hmm.
getting like 3 experience per fight.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I feel like I can barely win. Like I can't win this fight, and I'm
Uh,
not getting enough fight. Nowadays I'd probably be like, okay, time to get good. But
It's a
my
that
whole point about RPGs is that they should be accessible to all types,
yeah,
and that's where, eh.
that game was like designed to be hard. At least that fucking fight was.
And that's what I remember once I got past that fight on the one playthrough that I actually got like halfway through the game. I never recall any other fights in the game up to that point giving me any trouble, like to the point where I would specifically remember them. But I remember that fight just being a pain in the ass and
Uh-huh.
grinding being basically a non-option.
Everyone who's played that game remembers that fight being a pain in the ass because that fight is just like objectively hard.
Okay, well, I don't know
And
anybody else who played it, so
yeah, but yeah, maybe they could have let you grind a little bit more for that, but I don't know, maybe they wanted to. Maybe they bad designed that into a way of making it non-grind horrible.
well, they might have been trying to make a situation where you're forced to learn how the
The me-
combat works early on in a complicated setting, and then that's why it lightens up later.
That's possible.
But it was still a very very rough introduction to the game.
It is. It is a yeah. It is a hard first boss.
But
But
in general, with the principle of level scaling and stuff like that, I had no complaints.
I don't either. I don't either. Because I do like that it kind of lets characters catch up and not fast enough for my Reen to catch up to everyone else. My fucking Reen is still one level lower than everyone else, and it annoys the hell out of me. But aside from that,
That's funny because it does create one weird thing that does bug me,
yeah,
and that's where the first time I played Cold Steel, way back when, I did
okay,
grind.
okay,
And what was funny is because the scaling works in that way, the game the way it does,
hmm,
what ended up happening was, and I discovered that this is just a thing. Let's say a character is level 63 and another character is level 62,
okay,
and they're both about to level up.
yeah,
And then you kill a boss that gives you a shitload of experience.
yeah,
So the amount of experience the characters get is based on their level at the time you kill the boss.
hmm,
So the character that's 62 can actually get enough experience that they will shoot past the character that's 63.
that they'll overtake the other one.
Yeah,
Nice.
and
Yeah,
that can happen depending on where people are when you fight certain fights. Just because a character is in the lead now doesn't mean they can't just shoot up later because of just one weird fluke.
one weirdly timed fight.
Yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense.
and ideally it should scale based on what your level is, including when you level up.
Like it stops scaling as much once you reach enough to level up.
Yeah, like once you level up, it adjusts to the next
Yeah, which sounds
thing.
all well and good, but I feel like that's just a lot more fucking programming work than.
I don't think it is, because most games do that.
Oh yeah.
I've never had a problem with characters shooting past levels, except in Cold Steel and the
Okay.
Suikoden games.
Huh.
Those are two where just I've given up on the idea of having the protagonist in the lead for the most part because everybody just shoots past all the time
Yeah.
and there's just no controlling it. So it's like, fuck it, whatever. I got
Yeah.
Rain in the lead just by funsies.
Yeah. I'm tempted to give my Reen the fucking experience boosting courts just to get him ahead and then call it good.
Well, what I did for fun was, you're still in Act One, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you are. During the interludes in Ymir,
Yeah.
I just used all the guest characters. So
Okay.
like Toval, Claire, Sharon,
Yeah.
Shannon. I think it's Shannon.
Yeah. It's
It's
Sharon.
Sharon. Okay.
Yeah.
And just made a party out of as many of them as I could every time. and
Okay.
it was fun because they're overpowered characters anyway,
Yeah, they are.
so it made those sections go very quickly,
Okay.
and it helped balance out the levels a bit.
Yeah. All right.
But that's beside the point.
That is very beside the point. We got sideways kind of far.
Point is, it's I
Enemy
don't
scaling, bad. Level scaling, fine.
you got that backwards, bro.
Well, enemy scaling, bad. Experience scaling, fine. There we
Yes,
go. That one.
and I mean it's just fucking natural because one of two things is going to happen. Either the
Hmm.
experience you get is going to get curved hard, or the experience required to level up is going to get curved hard.
Yeah.
It's A or B. There's no getting out of it. You have to
There's no,
have that balance.
there's no way that everyone requires the same amount. Every level is the same and everyone always gets the same.
Yeah, because then how could you have any kind of scaling?
You, yeah, you
Because
couldn't.
part of, like you said, in terms of the scaling, is not just the scaling in terms of the difficulty of the enemies, but also the rewards.
Hmm. And if a level 2 guy fights an enemy and a level 50 guy fights an enemy and they get the same amount of progression or the same amount of reward, then that doesn't work.
That and also the idea that you could fight a level 2 enemy and a level 70 enemy,
And still get the same amount of experience for it.
yeah, and still get more or less the same amount of experience for it because, it always takes you 100 experience to level up.
Yeah. Then everyone will just be grinding the first dungeon until they're max level, and then the game's really boring.
So, funny story on that to close.
Okay.
Speaking of being able to control your level in whatever the fuck game I was talking about earlier, Bravely Default,
Okay.
I know somebody who recommended Bravely Default to a friend,
Okay.
and that friend did exactly that. Set the difficulty or the random encounter rate to high, and grinded to level 99 in like the first area,
Okay.
and then realized I screwed something up and had to restart the file.
Nice. That sounds shitty.
I I don't get why you would do that to begin with.
Because you can. Because it makes the rest of the game super easy.
Yeah, but to me, at that point, just fucking hack the game and cheat your way through to the end, you know?
Yeah. But that way you cheat. But if you do that, you cheated. But if you do what he did, you didn't cheat.
I mean, people are free to live their lives how they want to live, but I don't get it.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. It's not for me, man.
Yeah. Pretty much. But
Okay,
alrighty.
that sums up our discussion for the week. See you next week when it'll be a special episode because it'll be episode 15,
Unless that was today.
unless that was today.